This is one of my favorite projects I've made. It's a Pokédex, but for plants featuring Theo. I built it in Blender and brought it to the web to make it fully interactive. Hey everyone, it's Kevin. Welcome back to the channel. For those who don't know, Theo is my desk plant and the whole reason this project exists. I picked him up from the clearance section of a garden store a couple of years ago. He waved at me from the shelf and I took that as a sign to bring him home. Now, Theo is obviously not from around here, but he's been slowly opening up about where he comes from. A big part of that are the plant friends he left behind. Apparently he had a lot of them. So he suggested we build a plant index together so I could get to know them. And I've been happily helping him do exactly that. Now these plants might look a little bit different from what you'd find at your local nursery, but they all have the same care needs as your typical house plant. So I thought it could be a helpful guide for plant people out there as well. We named this project Theo's Plantfriendex and it's just getting started. If you want to check it out, you can visit heyclaytheo.com or find a link below. Theo aside, this has been a really fun project to work on. I created Theo about 2 years ago. I wanted a character my work could actually revolve around, something that could be a vehicle for whatever I was learning and experimenting with at the time. I'd gone really into plants, so Theo felt like a natural reflection of that. It started with these 2D and 3D shorts detailing my interactions with Theo in the real world. I'll link that introductory video below. Then it expanded into 3D printing, but I'd been wanting to push things further. So I come from a graphic and motion design background, but when I started this channel, I picked up 3D through Blender and was learning to code on this side. I did a lot of early experiments creating art with processing. I didn't really post about it on YouTube the same way as my Blender journey, but I was pretty active with it on social media. It was a great way to learn because everything you make is immediately visual. And when I'm picking up something new, I find it sticks a lot faster when I can actually build something with it. I just hadn't figured out how to bring the Blender side and the coding side together into something cohesive other than add-ons. I thought about making a game at some point, but I wanted something simpler and more accessible. So I started thinking about a web experience. Three.js had been on my radar for a while. If you're not familiar, it's a JavaScript library that lets you display and interact with 3D graphics directly in a browser, so you don't need to download anything or open a separate app. I bought Bruno Simon's Three.js course a couple of years back trying to get into it, but I never found the time to really commit. I do intend to revisit it soon though. It wasn't until I came across Andrew Wan's channel that something finally clicked and I felt ready to actually try it. Andrew is a really skilled creative developer and an amazing teacher. He balances the technical and the creative side really well and honestly just made the whole thing feel approachable. He's also doing pretty amazing things in this space, so if you're interested in getting into this, I'd highly recommend checking him out. I'll link his channel below. So this project was the first time all of it actually came together. Blender, coding, design. It finally felt like all those things had a reason to exist in the same space. The general idea was to create a plant index with practical and helpful care tips for each entry. So every plant would be based on a real house plant, but illustrated according to Theo's descriptions and my own interpretation of them. I wanted it to feel like a game, so I created some prototypes in After Effects as social media posts just to test the concept before committing to building it. I wasn't sure if I was actually going to make it a real thing, but I really enjoyed creating the entries, and I kept thinking they'd be so much more impactful as an actual experience, which was the original intention anyway. So I challenged myself to make it real as a website anyone could easily access. Now, I wasn't trying to overcomplicate this. For my first Three.js project, I wanted to keep the scope small and doable. Since I already had some of the pages made, I thought it would be fun to house everything inside a game device so you could actually cycle through the entries. To get started, I used one of Andrew's videos as a guide and adjusted it based on what I was trying to accomplish. The plan broke down into a few parts. First, I needed to model the device in Blender with all the buttons built out for interactivity. Then I needed to export the plant pages as individual files the device could display. Now the illustrations were created in Blender and animated in After Effects. And then I needed to think about functionality, sound effects, and music before bringing it all together with code. I also knew from the start that I wanted hand-drawn elements around the device to make it feel like Theo's world. Grease Pencil is is a pretty core part of my work. If you're not familiar with it, it's a tool in Blender that lets you draw 2D and 3D space, and I really love that combination of depth. It sounds simple enough to implement, but grease pencil objects don't actually contain any geometry, which means getting them to display on a website or just any other workflow in general is kind of a challenge, and I'll get to that. On the Blender side, a big difference for me was working with cycles and texture baking, since I primarily work in Eevee. I wasn't sure if I wanted something toon shaded or more realistic, but it was a good opportunity to try something different. Getting a 3D model out of Blender and into a browser was also a learning experience for me because the two systems speak pretty different languages when it comes to materials and shaders. So I kept things as simple as possible just to understand how everything would translate. One early lesson was around shaders specifically. Some properties carry over fine, but procedural textures don't, and that's where baking comes in, which again was a pretty new workflow for me. The coding part is where things got more challenging. So Andrew's tutorials gave me a solid foundation, setting up the project environment, getting the scene running with a camera and renderer, and loading the Blender model into the browser. From there, I built out the button system, which involved raycasting to detect which button you actually clicked, and then animating each press so it physically responds. The screen plays video, so each plant entry is a video file that loads and plays directly onto the device's screen. To enhance the feel of a device, I added controls on the side, so volume, mute, and a power button that actually turns the screen off and disables the controls. And at the end, I added a touchscreen section that links out to the shop and other Theo content. Now back to the grease pencil situation. Again, I wanted those hand-drawn elements but couldn't export them as geometry. I did consider converting them to meshes using my Inkform add-on, but I didn't want them to feel too solid. That would have taken away from the hand-drawn quality I was going for. So instead, I exported them as transparent PNGs and placed them on flat planes at varying depths in 3D space. It gave me exactly the look I was going for and opened up some ideas for other things I could use grease pencil for in the future. I deployed everything through Vercel, and it was a really smooth process to set up. Right now, there are only a few entries like the Monstera Deliciosa and the String of Pearls to start, but each one has Theo giving care tips and fun facts about what those plants are like in his world. I really do love plants and have quite a few of them at this point, so I'm categorizing everything by genus and temperament. So genus covers aroid, tropical, desert, succulent, cactus, vine, and fern. And for temperament, easygoing, needy, sensitive, vigorous, and dramatic. I tried to capture the full range of personalities that plant parents deal with. This is going to be a living guide that I keep adding to over time, so there's a lot more coming. I love creating the illustrations and the whole production of it, and I'm genuinely excited to keep building. Overall, this has just been a really rewarding project. I love being able to take an idea and turn it into something functional, something people can actually interact with, and it's opened up a whole new direction for where I want to take my work going forward. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Theo and I are already planning the next batch of entries, so I want to know, what plant should we add to the Plantfriendex next? Let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. If you want to explore the plant guide yourself, you can find it at heycalatheo.com. Link is in the description. See you all in the next video.